Enough of the banter. Welcome, everybody, to today's Compliance Corner. I am still Orly Burlov, and she is still
Noel Vestal.
all right. Doesn't change, it only gets better. And today we are talking about the compliant supply chain. We're talking about supply chain, which most people think means why their Apple computers aren't showing up on time or why anything is delayed this time of year. It's because of the supply chain. But what we're talking about is the supply chain as it relates to the DoD, the defense contractors like your Rockwell or your take any big company, Boeing or so on, and all the companies that work under them. Those are all the companies that are called subcontractors, and they all make up the supply chain. And so what is the challenge we're talking about today, Noel? Why don't you kick us off here?
So we're talking about something that I've definitely had a lot of people that have talked about on these compliance calls that I have every week. A lot of people have mentioned how difficult it can be if you're the subcontractor to a prime. So like the prime is the one who actually has, all the DFARS clauses directly applied to them. However, they also have to trickle that down to their subcontractors. So then the subcontractor.
And let's just be clear, right? We're talking about exchanging CUI from controlled unclassified information, that's CUI, from prime contractors to the subcontractors below them. So prime, sub,
CUI.
Right. And that goes all the way down, right? It's turtles all the way down.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for mentioning that. So when you've got it, the prime, and you've got all the trickle down of CUI to the sub. So maybe the prime has 1,000 employees. It's really big. And then the sub has maybe 50. Well, maybe that subcontractor who's getting that direct trickle down also has trickle down to their subcontractors, because a lot of companies that are smaller will, hire people out as subcontractors for different things, or hire companies out for different things. So we're talking about that supply chain more than anything else. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm getting information from the prime, which is getting it from the government, right? That information goes to them. Then it comes down to me, and then I have to send it to my subcontractors. What does that mean? Like, how do I do that? How do I make
sure secure all along the way, according to
all the long way,
according to the NIST 800-171 controls. But before we jump into this further, because you've done a great job of kind of framing the question, we should talk about people's obligations. This came out in the DFARS interim rule back in 2020-21. And so why don't you let people know what are their DFARS obligations vis-a-vis the supply chain?
Definitely. So you've got DFARS 7020, which it should be in pretty much all contracts at this point anyway. But that's talking about the NIST 800-171 standards. And that does state that a subcontractor, so meaning if I'm the contractor and I have a subcontractor, so like I'm the prime, right? Here I am. And I decide to hire company X, who is
the ABC, right?
Company X is going to be my subcontractor. Right. Company A, who is the prime, I already have all my NIST 800-171 stuff done. I've been assessed. I make sure every 3 years to check that box. Everything's great. My subcontractor has to be the same. It has the same exact requirements. And then below that, me as the subcontractor, when I hire a subcontractor, technically speaking, they have to be compliant as well, because again, the prime is inadvertently hiring those people down here too. So everybody has to be compliant with that. DFARS 7021 is obviously talking about CMMC. So that's not in contracts yet, but it will be. And so instead of having 7020, where we say NIST 800-171, it will be moving over to 7021. At least that's what we think, to CMMC. And so it'll be the same rules, just it'll be CMMC under the CMMC umbrella.
Got it. Yep. So we've talked about, the challenge or the problem statement, obligations. Let's talk a little bit, though, about what are the challenges that defense contractors, particularly subcontractors, are seeing in enforcing and ensuring the supply chain. We know that they're required to, but why isn't this something that we can just wave a magic wand on?
Gosh, wouldn't that be nice?
I'm just looking for a place to wave my magic wand.
That's really, aren't we all? But I think one of the biggest challenges is communication between those three levels. So if you've got a prime who has a certain standard for their compliance, they use a certain software solution. The subcontractor may use something else, and the subcontractor may use a different thing.
Product number 3.
Right. So you end up with like all kinds of issues with that. It's almost like a game of telephone where like you tell somebody one thing, the next person hears something, and then they hear something. I mean, like that's kind of where the
Right.
communication can happen. So instead, what a lot of different companies do this is very common. They'll use email because email is the one thing that we all have, right?
Right.
Every company does. And so if the prime will email to the sub and the sub will email to their sub, whatever information, and that information travels through. Well, that seems really great in theory, but there's a lot of challenges
Right.
when you're talking about security of just a regular Outlook,
Right.
email.
Regular Gmail. I mean, those are what people use. Outlook,
Right.
Gmail.
Absolutely. And even with some of the basic level encryptions, we can still have some serious issues with security.
Right.
But that's something I know that we've talked about that we're probably going to have like a whole other video just on, email
Yeah.
security type stuff.
Yeah.
But
We're talking to Wanda's talent agent about having.
she could come back and talk to us about email security, I mean, because why wouldn't Wanda want to talk about that? Well,
She's a hard gal to get. She has a lot of fans.
She got a full dance card. I understand,
Yeah. All right.
it makes sense. Well, but so not to get too much into that here, but that's one of the biggest challenges is how do you do that communication and collaboration safely and securely when you do have three different companies with three different levels or different types of solutions.
Right. And I mean, to highlight, it's not just that they're three different levels. It's also going along with that as three different levels of budget, right? You have the prime that because they're so larger, or it's going to have a much larger budget, and then a smaller budget, and then an even smaller one.
Exactly.
So the solution that works for company A at the top of this food chain doesn't necessarily work for the ones below.
Way down. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's an excellent point. Yeah, it's just, and you don't know what, and sometimes the prime, this is even more interesting, just to throw a wrench in all of it. Sometimes the prime is the 40-person company and the sub is the 1,000-person company. That happens quite often because there's quite a bit in contracting of different types of contracts for like what's called, small, like it's the 8A set asides and stars. And there's like all these different types of avenues, like contracting avenues that small businesses can then get prime contracts with. And larger businesses cannot actually go after those contracts at all. They are small business set aside specifically.
Got it.
So you end up with some of these really small companies who maybe they have a very affordable solution, but then the prime company comes in, the larger company comes in as a subcontractor, and they have a completely different one because, like you said, their budget is totally different than what the small companies is.
Yeah. So is part of the challenge there, just as you noted, just the communication? Is it trying to find a way that technologies can talk to each other? What are we kind of?
I think that every contract is going to be different, obviously. So every set of challenges is going to be a little different. But the main ones I think are that ability to communicate that CUI information and collaborate on it. Is there going to be a centralized location or repository where that stuff is going to live, that's safe and secure, that is compliant, that everybody can get to and everybody can access that needs to? And everybody can do that seamlessly. That is a very big challenge, I think, for pretty much everybody in the DoD supply chain right now, just being able to communicate, like we were talking about email, but also collaborate on things when they need to. If I have a piece of CUI that I need to edit for whatever reason, but I'm at the top, right? But I need to edit it with my subcontractor. Well, if I have software A and they have software B and those don't communicate and we don't have a central point that everyone can access, I think that's the biggest challenge, is figuring out an affordable solution that everybody in that supply chain can use that is a centralized hub.
Right.
Even if they have even if company A, B, and C all have three different main focused, solutions they have for compliance, if they have something that everybody can use that, is either set up by the prime or, the sub can whoever sets it up, it doesn't matter, but everybody agrees this is compliant. We're going to use this. This is okay. This is where all that information happens. I think that's the biggest challenge, is finding a solution that's going to fit for so many different scenarios where it's just going to be different with every contract, unfortunately, and with every setup of subs and primes and everything else.
I mean, so this is what you were just hinting at, right? This idea of a solution. I mean, you need to kind of find a way that the Tower of Babel can communicate with one another. I mean, one thing that we talk about a little bit we talk about a lot of Prevail is, using Prevail and using Prevail's new Prevail Express as a way for companies and their subcontractors to talk to one another. How would you though describe this solution?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Being able to find something that's, I mean, obviously we are Prevail is our company, but we really do have a solution that's very easy to use for this type of scenario where it's relatively inexpensive. You can only buy as many, actual licenses as you need. So like if I only have 5 people in the total of that, prime to sub sort of supply chain who really need to see CUI and interact with it and, send it back and forth, what have you, I get 5 licenses on Prevail for very cheap and we're good and everything's set and we're ready to go. And
Right.
then you don't end up in a situation where you've got so many different solutions kind of fighting each other. So that's one of the places where I think Prevail is a really wonderful.
I mean, just being clear, we don't want to say Prevail's the only solution.
No, it is not.
Contact your local competent MSP or provider.
RPO or
your mileage may
CPO
vary as to what works for you.
Yeah, there are plenty of other solutions that are out there for sure. Yeah, we are definitely not the only one. We just know this one the best, so that's why we're mentioning.
And if you are the company with subcontractors, your subcontractors would join for free. Okay,
Yeah,
enough of the Prevail pushing.
And
The
we're done.
idea though is finding clearly you cannot send CUI in regular email. Complete violation of the rules. It makes it exposed.
Yes.
But you need the solutions, as you were saying. For example, finding a way that you can secure your data. We mentioned Prevail. There's DoD, the DoD Safe.
Yep, DoD Safe is another one. There's other secure email options out there as well too, if that's something that works better for your company. But yeah, DoD Safe is definitely an option for sending items back and forth and that sort of thing. It is a little clunky, as anybody out there who's used it knows. I myself have used it quite a bit. It's a little clunky, but it works. And especially if maybe you only have like 3 or 4 times a year that this needs to happen, then maybe you don't want to buy a solution and you just want to use something that's out there. Then you go to DoD Safe, no problem. DoD Safe does not have an email function. It's just for file sharing, but it certainly can do that. And then you have to think, well, once you bring it off of DoD Safe onto your computer, you got to think about all that too. What does that mean? Your computer is now in scope, et cetera, et cetera. But that's stuff that everybody has to think about anyway. So DoD Safe is a great option if that's something easier. Somebody like us, Prevail, or whoever you want to use that is a end-to-end encrypted zero trust kind of email situation. So you don't want to end up with, if you use an email and you have encryption and you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, I mean, that's great. The problem is that you end up with that sort of question mark when it's sitting on a server.
Right.
That's really where the problem comes in for most email situations. Like, for example, anything end-to-end encrypted like we are at Prevail is different because the server itself is encrypted. So when that email is sitting there waiting, to be opened or sitting there waiting in your inbox or what have you, nobody can if they try to get to it, they're just going to get gibberish. Whereas other not end-to-end encrypted solutions, they can get into that. If you get into that server, you get into everybody's email, all of their emails.
You've gotten the whole kit and caboodle.
Precisely.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of the point to highlight in this. When you're looking at a solution, make sure whatever email that your solution you're using, make sure data is encrypted on the server.
Yes.
It's not enough to be encrypted in transit and encrypted at rest.
It's just not anymore, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
That is how the bad guys are able to access your data.
It's one of many ways, but yes.
one of the main ways. But so let's kind of just round this out. We're talking in the idea of supply chain. You want to make sure that, and you're obligated obviously to keep your data secure all the way down. We talked about a couple of solutions and given you some thoughts on what you need to be cognizant of and need to be wary of. Are there any other things we should let our esteemed audience know about in this regard?
I mean, I think that we've covered quite a bit. Like we said, we're probably going to do a sort of a bigger version of this and dive into it more in another episode. And also, if you are interested in having 15 minutes with me talking about compliance, then we're probably going to link that in the show notes, I'm imagining.
Yes, as always.
As always.
Okay, everyone. Thank you. You have been a lovely audience. And
thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.